And it is time for our N10-008 pre-show. It's our study group pre-show, trying to make sure we got everything ready to go for the top of the hour. As you can see, we're about 11:51, which means we got 9 minutes until we get started. What else do we have going on here? We got a lot going on here. Oh, boy. Okay. We don't need, here, we can do this, and we can move this over to here. Nice. And we can get that ready. This all looks pretty good. Let's look at, I'm looking at cameras. They look good. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll get started at the top of the hour. Get you up here. Folks already checking in. Jeff's here from downtown Houston, Texas. We got a lot going on for Network Plus today. All new questions, of course. Everything is always new every time we do a live stream. We'll start at the top of the hour. The first hour will be questions that I ask. Second part of the live stream will be questions you ask. So we got a little of everything. Now, Alpha Wolf, you say you're in Disneyland. Do you mean you're in Disneyland? Because that's one of the best places I should probably stream to. There in the Magic Kingdom, somewhere in the Orlando Disney World area. There's Minnesota is here. Thanks for being here. Hey, Houston, Atlanta, and Mobile, Alabama, and Columbus, Ohio. I haven't been back to Dublin in a while. Need to do that. Speaking of Dublin, there's Ireland, different Dublin, or the Dublin. It's hard to explain. There's Canada. Hey, hello, Canadians. Rhode Island's here. San Diego, Maryland, New York, Guildford, UK. We got Brazil. We got Anaheim. Oh, you're in Anaheim. Okay. Well, that is right down the street, right? We'll go with that. We'll make that happen. We'll consider that Disney, close enough to Disneyland. There's Alabama again. There's Carolina and Chicago. Hello, Ghana. Hello, Lexington, Kentucky. Johannesburg is here. DFW. I haven't been to Dallas in a while. I need to do that. There's LA, Saudi, North Carolina, Tampa, Florida. There's the Floridians. There's Puerto Rico, Arkansas, Philippines, Texas. Lots of folks checking in. Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for being here. We'll get started at the top of the hour. Let's put a phone over here. Let's see if I can put a phone where it's not going to create a problem for anything else in this room. There's Miami and there's Orlando. See, we got Florida checking in. We get here eventually. We got this happening. Gindy says taking my Network Plus this month. I wonder if I can, use the thing that I put here so that you can see what I see. There we go. Saying taking my Network Plus this month. Good deal. I hope this helps a little bit. Get your studying going. We'll have to make sure we cover the bases today, and we will. We've got a lot to go through today, all Network Plus related. Get started in about 6 minutes and a few seconds. So we'll get things going here. Everything here is set up. We got recordings going here. That's good. I've already done the podcast intro, so you don't have to sit through that. This is up here is the live stream, and everything seems to be going well so far. Banging on stuff. Got a lot. The material for the CCNA seems similar to Network Plus. Well, CCNA is more of a intermediate level certification. If I'm able to pass the CCNA, will I be able to pass the Network Plus without extra studying? Probably not. Have to do a little bit of studying because there is enough of a difference between the two. There are topics on the Network Plus that are not covered on the CCNA, just as there are CCNA topics that are not covered on Network Plus. Grab the exam objectives and you'll know for sure. You'll be able to cover it. I think if you probably have been through the CCNA, then you're already at a bit of a higher level than the Network Plus, because CCNA is an intermediate level certification. It's not an entry level. And they're used for different things, obviously. A CCNA has a different set of skills. It's a different job. It's a different job description. Employers are looking for someone CCNA. They're looking for something very specific. Same thing for Network Plus. Network Plus has a very specific skill set that's directed towards a specific set of job functions. Same scenario. So, of course, the idea, a lot of people online think they're interchangeable. They just swap one out for the other. It's networking, right? This one does networking and that one does networking, so they must be the same. You can swap them out. And I think the Cisco networking is better than the CompTIA networking. No, I think the CompTIA networking is better than it's completely different certifications for different reasons. So you can't interchange them. They're not the same. And that's why I think Network Plus is really as popular as it is, because there is so much in the Network Plus that is so fundamental, things you really do need to know across all of IT, not just for people who are network professionals. And I think that's really the appeal. You got to get just a little bit more more detail, more fundamentals in Network Plus, which I think is great. What else we got going on here? Time frame, we got 4 minutes left. 4 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. We're getting there. We'll figure it out. I'm working on quite a bit on this side. I can't really talk about too much of what I'm working on. But there's a lot going on this side too. So I just don't sit in this room quietly between live streams. There's things happening all the time. I guess that's the good part of what I do, is there's never a place where I am done. There's always something to do. Speaking of which, here's Alex asks, hey, what about an exam practice book for Network Plus? Is there something coming out? Is there something there? No, not really. Have nothing to say along those lines. There's nothing to report. I think I've always said that I'd love to have one available, that if one was to be published, it would be in the upcoming months. And I think that's probably pretty accurate. Now, how many months that is that 2 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 18 months? We need to know. That we don't know. When it's done, it's done. And that's all I can say. If it ever appears, it will be in a number of months. How about that? It takes a long time to write a book. And that's why. And especially the way I like to write them and the content I like to put in. But I'd love to have one. I would love to do that. And it sounds like some folks would like me to have that as well. So we'll get there eventually. What's next here? 2 minutes to go, and we'll get started with the live stream. Stick around for that. I've got instructions on how you can participate if you're here live, so don't miss the introduction to that. So you'll we do not have any plans for a WhatsApp page for this group. That's relatively redundant because we have the Discord. So you can always go to professormesser.com/Discord. That's what is the great place to go. That's where pretty much everyone is. And we're disappearing. We don't have to worry about mobile phone. DCP, DCV core. No plans on that. Remember, I've seen it somewhere. World. So we'll have and no, it's decreasing. Do that. The deal. Very nice. Odd. This one, figure that out. Where the problem is happening. Quad 9. And no, low. Get lost. There's Comcast network to be the that's not good. Problems are, let's see if we can make this a different size here. A little bit bigger. Except now you can't really see. That was a mistake. There we go. Better. We'll move it down here. There we go. And you can see where the problems are happening. Definitely problems on my local provider's network. Provider. So what is going on? Work. Everything here is fine. Let's reset. There we go. And see where things go from there. Router here in Tallahassee, and I think the packet on the Atlanta side are probably really closer to me. Like on the way, it's really router. So there is no alternative network, unfortunately. Let's see what happens. How it in a moment. Figure out going. I'll have to figure this out. It's an ongoing problem, it seems. So we'll have to see. That looks good, but not so much. You have these hits. We're going to keep for one to come back. And we'll see how this goes. We'll just have to wait it body. That extra general. How this goes. Don't want to do that. Won't be any fun. I have all the questions. Fortunately, that's just where. In fact, I should probably bring my MTR back up. And see what. Because this looks okay until you get to a, and then there are problems. Over to the other YouTube. We're currently experiencing some. Right. Not going to work for anybody. Making that happen, our cash, that number needs to be 3. So not, it needs to be 3, the number 3. So catch up with itself. Works for me. See what happens. Get there. So we'll see if we can get this thing happening. I have a sneaking suspicion we are definitely not in good shape with that. So we'll see. I know Starlink might be actually a reasonable solution of this. Exactly what we don't. So set up though right in the studio. So yes, that's what I should do is start my own ISP. I like that idea. I like that. Can I VPN past the dirty node? Well, I still have to go through that node to back to this. So that's not gonna. It's not really gonna help to do that. But let's see if nope, it goes back down to 4-5%. I'm gonna stop it immediately and see. Coincidentally, stabilize things, or this could be that it actually was resolved while I was moving things over from the primary server to the secondary. In either case, we're going to just go with it for now. So hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Let's get started with a live stream. Hopefully, we are in better shape now. Look good now. You might want to refresh. And let's give it a shot, shall we? Let's just do a live stream and see what happens now that we're over on the secondary YouTube server. I think now is as good a time as any to start a live stream, and we're going to see how this goes. Let's start her up. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2023 Professor Messer N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. We've got all brand new questions for you directly from the CompTIA exam objectives for the N10-008. These are questions, obviously, you've not seen before. That's the idea, is that I have brand new questions for you every month, and I would like you to be able to follow along if you're here live. Let's have a look at how you can do that. Some folks were asking about this in the chat room. The way that you can participate live is to pop open a new browser window and browse over to this link right here, professormesser.com/QA. That will get you over to the question that you see. You'll see one there once you arrive at that web page. If you're watching this on the replay, this particular link isn't going to help you much. You have to be here live to be able to know when this event is going to be. There's also an app for this. It's called the Socrative Student app, and you can find it in your favorite app store. That app will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. That will get you to the question of the month. This is our rewind question, really, from last month to see if you're able to get into the live stream. And indeed, if you're able to see a question that it asks the one that you see on your screen, which is, which of the following would be most commonly associated with an MDF? Would it be a color laser printer, an LCD projector, an access point, a docking station, or a core internet router? Which of the following would be most commonly associated with an MDF? Is it a color laser printer, an LCD projector, an access point, a docking station, or a core internet router? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to follow the link on your screen and go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in the answer. And we're going to come back to that question in just a moment. Thanks for being here. We aren't able to do these live streams without your help. So thanks for joining us and being here, either watching live or on the replay. If you'd like to see the other videos that are available or to see our entire Network Plus training course, it's all online. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and you'll be able to find everything you need for the video replays of the Network Plus course. Of course, we have weekly Network Plus pop quiz questions, and you can go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram for those questions. Now, we also have all of these courses available for the latest version of the Network Plus exam. The latest version of the Network Plus exam is the N10-008. It was introduced in September of 2021, which means the estimated retirement is somewhere around March of 2025. That means if you're currently working on your Network Plus certification, you have plenty of time as we sit here in February of 2023. The exam itself is 90 minutes long. You might get a maximum of 90 questions, and you need to earn a score of 720 on a scale from 100 to 900. So that is an odd scoring system. So really, it's difficult to know exactly how many questions you need to get right. You just need to get a score of 720. Hopefully, that's something at the end of the exam that shows up on your final page as a 720 or higher. The exam itself consists of different types of questions, not only multiple choice, but also performance-based questions. We'll talk about those performance-based questions in just a bit. And if you want to know what's on the exam, everything is documented in the CompTIA exam objectives. There's your link, the first link of the study group for the exam objectives. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, and you'll be able to have those objectives downloaded. You'll be able to read through them. They make a great checklist, so make sure you grab those. Of course, we have our entire Network Plus course available for you to watch online for free. But if you need a downloadable version of the course, we have that available in our Success Bundle, which not only includes the course itself and downloadable video and audio, but it also includes my course notes. I have access to Q&A here. There's a lot that's there. You can find out more about it at professormesser.com/netsuccess. I also have a video replay of this available immediately afterwards on YouTube, but you can also get an audio version of the replay available in podcast format. And you can find that on my website at professormesser.com/podcast, or simply have a look at your favorite streaming audio provider. If you go to Spotify or any of the other Google podcasts, you go to Apple Podcasts, they're all in there. And if it's not in your favorite podcast listening front end, let me know, and I'll add it to that one as well. You can find out about all of these links and adding it to your own podcast listening program by visiting the link at your page, the bottom of the page, professormesser.com/podcast. Of course it is. The A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups are all listed there. If you go to YouTube about a day afterwards, you will find that there is a set of timestamps available in the YouTube video description. That doesn't happen magically. That's the hard work of Lori, my marketing manager. Hey, Lori, she's watching the replay. So she's listening to all of this and putting the timestamps in for everything that we are doing. This is really helpful, especially when the times change a bit from episode to episode. For example, maybe you don't start at the top of the hour. Maybe you start 12 minutes after the hour. That's just an example. Not that that would ever happen in real life, but you'll find all of those timestamps on YouTube. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. We also have a Discord server when we're not doing one of these live streams. You'd like to chat with other people who are studying for their exams, maybe have some study sessions, and of course, myself and others are available to answer questions out on the Discord. Simply visit professormesser.com/Discord or click the Discord icon in the upper right on the Professor Messer website. Eventually, you're going to need to take your Network Plus exam, and you could certainly go out to the CompTIA website and pay full price to take your Network Plus exam. But why would you do that when I have exactly the same vouchers on my site available at a discount? So you don't have to pay full price. You can simply go to professormesser.com/vouchers if you are in the US or Canada, and you'll be able to have access to these discounted vouchers. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need a voucher key. You don't need any special enhancements to your browser or any plugins. Simply visit professormesser.com/vouchers. And not only do you get vouchers on that site, if you purchase a voucher on the Professor Messer website, I'll include for free a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. So it doesn't cost you anything extra. If anything, it's part of the discount. You pay less and you get more. Follow all of that, professormesser.com/vouchers, if you ever need any one of those. So hopefully that can help you with your studies. And some of you have already done this. I want to thank Belong in the chat room, who says, thanks very much, Professor Messer. I passed the Core 2A+. I'm now certified. Your notes and practice exams helped me a lot to pass. Congratulations on your A+ certification. If you're here, you must be studying for Network Plus as well. So that helps too. Absolutely helps doing for what you're doing. And hopefully you were able to use this voucher link to do that. Thank you very much for the $20 Canadian Super Chat as well. We appreciate all of your support and the things that you put in there. These vouchers indeed help support the site. So instead of going to the CompTIA website, not only are you getting a discount on the Professor Messer website with the vouchers, they also help keep the website running. So thanks so much for your support there as well. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which is, which of the following would be most commonly associated with an MDF? Would that be a laser printer, a color laser printer, an LCD projector, an access point, a docking station, or a core internet router? Let's see how you answered this one. Let's show the results. And we can see that 60% of you, 60, say that it is a core internet router. 21% say access point. 11% say color laser printer. And then single digits, 6% for docking station and 4% for LCD projector. This is probably something that a lot of people don't think about until they get into the MDF, which of course is our main distribution frame. We often just refer to it as the data center. That's what's really going on in there. That's where we have the core part of the network in a particular building is our main distribution frame, or MDF. In fact, you'll probably never hear anybody refer to it as the main distribution frame. It's almost always the MDF. Hey, have you checked the MDF? Did we leave it in the MDF? Are we configuring it in the MDF or the IDF? That's the idea. But since this is the core of the network configuration, A lot of your infrastructure devices are going to be in this room. The termination for your WAN links will be in the MDF. If you ever need to start doing testing, it's very often done from the MDF and out. It's kind of the point where everything stops being yours and transitions over to a third party is in the MDF. And then, of course, if you're trying to find the data, the servers and other things, they're going to be in there as well. Your main distribution frame is primarily infrastructure equipment. This is not where users have access. They have no way to get into the MDF, nor should they. All of this important equipment that you don't want anybody else to touch is in the MDF. So your switches, your routers, your firewalls, your WAN links, major servers, anything else that keeps the systems running is very commonly in the MDF. So if we look at the answer that we have that 60% of you chose is core internet router, well, that makes perfect sense. If you're in an MDF, you probably do have a core router that's in there. So your core internet router, 60% of you chose that one. That is the right answer. That's exactly what we were looking for. All of the other things listed on here would not be in an MDF traditionally. They would not be most commonly associated with an MDF. For example, laser printers. If you have a laser printer in an MDF, nobody's able to get to the laser printer to take their output off the top because the MDF is locked up and away from the users. Same thing for LCD projectors. Same thing for docking stations. And to some degree, an access point. Access points aren't usually in the MDF. We usually have the access points where the users happen to be. So very commonly, access points would not be the first thing we would put into an MDF. If we look at all of the different options here and the one that would be most commonly associated with an MDF, we would indeed choose what pretty much everyone, well, 60% of you chose, which is the core internet router. You'd find firewalls, maybe your core switches in there. And of course, you have things like your wiring for all of those coming in, all your patch panels, all your punch down blocks, they're probably in your MDF as well. That is the right answer. If you chose E, core internet router, you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well, let's keep this party going. You know, one of the things I do as my first new question in the study group is to give you a question that is not multiple choice. And in fact, I have a fill-in-the-blank question. Even though we don't tend to get fill-in-the-blank questions on the exam, you could. We don't tend to see them, however. But part of these, if you're ever working through these, is that the questions that you get might be a matching question. They might be one where you have to put things in a particular order. They might be a drag and drop question. There's a lot of other things that you might find there. So I have for you a fill-in-the-blank question. This is your performance-based question of the month, and it asks, name these connectors. Now, obviously, if you're listening in on the podcast side, this isn't going to help you very much. This is a bit of a visual daily double, if you will. So all of these 4 different images on your screen correlate back to a specific name of a connector. Now, if you think you know the answer, you want to follow the link that's on your screen, professormusser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, I want you to name each one of these connector types, these 4 different connectors that are on your screen, and you tell me what those connectors happen to be. Now, in that previous question, somebody said, well, do you get partial credit if you answered maybe access point? No, it's wrong, because your question asks which one of those would be most likely associated with an MDF, and an access point is not most likely associated with that. So in that case, I would not expect that you would be able to get partial credit for something like that. In fact, you should probably just assume you never get partial credit and just keep trying to get the exact answer that you should be providing with each one of these. CompTIA has said that in some cases they can provide partial credit, but in most cases, probably not. They just don't tell us how much we might or might not get partial credit. So never expect that you're going to get it, because they certainly don't tell you that you will. It's one of those, I think, if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to decide in an exam, do I answer this for a certain number of points or do I answer something else for a certain number of points, then you're really wrapped around the axle, because we don't know how many points each question is worth. We don't know if you're going to get multiple choice. And if you're trying to negotiate the exam based on those, then you're probably on a very slippery surface to begin with. That's not a very useful strategy, in my opinion. Let's look at these connectors, though. I see a number of you putting in the answers to these connectors for both A, B, C, and D. Hopefully you're familiar with what these connectors happen to be. There's a number of different network connectors on the exam, as you might already know. And if you walk into a data center and you're looking at all the different connections they have for their network, then you're probably going to need to know what some of these connectors happen to be as well. So let's see how specific you can get with these connector types, and let's step through them one at a time. We'll start with the upper left. The first one on our list is this sort of an 8-position, 8-connector type of connection. So in that case, it would be an RJ45. That is very clearly RJ45. If you've ever plugged in an Ethernet connection, if you've ever plugged in any type of network connection, then you've probably worked quite a bit with an RJ45. Started off easy on that one. Hopefully something you recognize. Now maybe something you don't recognize. The second one on our list, it does appear to be some type of punch-down block, but as you've probably seen in the Network Plus exam objectives, there are a lot of different punch-down blocks you need to know. Which kind is this one? Well, that's a 110 block. Very common in the United States to use 110. Maybe not as common in other countries, but if you're doing anything with punch-down blocks, especially in the US and Canada, you're probably going to see quite a few of the 110 blocks. And this one seems to be wired in a very interesting, looks like they're using this one for analog telephone, actually. And they've got multiple telephone links going out for that one. That seems to be what that is. So they've taken the same extension, and they're using it not only on this pair, but also another pair as well. You can see they're looping around. Be very different if you were working this to be able to use it for Ethernet, for example, because there would be a lot more than just 2 wires on the punch down, certainly. Third on our list is what appears to be a fiber connection up here with the blue background. Those are ST connections. The ST connection, probably one of the different types of fiber connections you need to know. These have probably been around the longest. ST was one of the very early types of network connections that we used on our Ethernet devices. We were first putting in fiber Ethernet for our devices. We were using a lot of ST connections. There are a lot of ST patch panels that I used to be able to manage and use and move things around. And it has that BNC connector on it, so you're able to plug in and twist it just a quarter of the way, and it locks in. You can't pull it out. That's why some people refer to it as a stick and twist, ST. That's a good way to think about it, I think. We used to call it that as well. Some people call it a straight through or a straight tip because it's got the long tip on the end of the cable, certainly longer than some other types of fiber connections. Those would be ST. And lastly, another type of fiber connection, this one very different in its style and structure. That is an LC connector. The LC connections usually are already put in pairs. These are separated out in our picture, which you very commonly can do, but often you'll see them as 2 different fiber pairs kind of stuck together, the entire pair stuck together. So there's 2 connections that we can simply plug in on both sides. But it's helpful to be able to disconnect them and move them around, especially if you plug them in one way on one side, you may have to flip the transmit and receive on the other side. So those LC connections, also fiber-based, a little bit smaller than the ST, which means we can fit many more of them into the single device that we're using, or it takes up less room in the device that we are using. So LC is that last one. So we have RJ45, a 110 block, an ST connector, and an LC connector. Hopefully that gets you familiar with those connector types. But that's not the only set of connectors you need to know. Make sure you have a look at your CompTIA exam objectives because there are many other connectors you need to be familiar with. It's very helpful if you can see a connector, whether it's the connection itself or the interface that you're plugging into. Make sure you can recognize those, whether they are part of the fiber, the cable, or the device you're connecting with. Now, if you knew this one, you're probably going to do okay with connectors. Make sure you're familiar with them. There's a lot more in the exam objectives you need to know. Let's shift gears and go back to a multiple choice-based question. Thankfully, this multiple choice-based question asks, A network technician needs to determine the total length of an installed Ethernet cable. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be a tone generator, crimper, punch-down tool, TDR, or inductive probe? A network technician needs to determine the total length of an installed Ethernet cable. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be tone generator, crimper, punch-down tool, TDR, or inductive probe? If you think you know the answer, it would be good if I put the link up. There it is. ProfessorMesser.com/QA will take you to the screen where you can plug in what you think the right answer is. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We want to instead go to these links, ProfessorMesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Knowing these physical tools is important. All of the answers here are real things. All of the answers here do come from the exam objectives. So even if you know the right answer, you think you know the right answer, look at the other possible answers and make sure you recognize what those happen to be. And if you don't recognize them, make sure you go back and check out the video on these specific topics. We'll talk more about what video that happens to be in just a moment. We'll have to see if you are familiar enough with using the hardware. Now, all of these should probably be in your toolbox anyway. You're going to show up on site. You've got your bag of tools. You should probably have at least these 5 things inside of it. So make sure you're familiar with all 5 of those and all of the other tools that you need to know. This is not a comprehensive list. The exam objectives do have a comprehensive list for you. Let's see how you did with this one. A network technician needs to determine the total length of an installed Ethernet cable. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it tone generator, crimper, punch-down tool, TDR, or inductive probe? What did you choose? 59%, almost the same as the last question, chose a TDR, whatever that is. 20% of you say it's tone generator, pretty much a tie for second with 18% who said inductive probe. And then a two-way tie for third place. 2% said crimper, 2% said punch-down tool. So this is one that can really be handy if you've got the budget for it, because the correct answer generally is a little more expensive than some of these other tools you might be using. For example, a time domain reflectometer, or TDR, tends to be something that is relatively expensive. And if you use the optical version, if you have a fiber network and you need an OTDR for optical time domain reflectometer, then you absolutely are going to be spending some money. So get ready for that one. Now, all of these, whether they are for the copper side with the TDR or the optical side with the OTDR, can do things that other tools simply can't do. For instance, you can plug it in. It will tell you how long a cable is. Even if that cable goes into the wall and up and around and somewhere on the other side of the building, you have your other connection. You simply plug in both of these. You can see the TDR has the second piece that you would put at the end of the cable, and it's able to tell you, oh, that run, 83 meters. Just tells you straight up exactly how long it is. It'll also tell you if there's any problems. If this cable has been spliced before, it'll tell you the impedance of the cable, if there's any signal losses. So some pretty smart mechanics in here, electronics, a lot of interesting code that's running inside of this, just to make sure that we can understand what these are. And you plug it in and you can simply say, is this legitimate lab? Just plugged in a category 6 cable. Is it really operating at the specifications required for category 6? And this is great. If you have somebody installing cable for you, they should have a TDR so they can certify that their installation does meet the minimum requirements for that particular category of cable. This is fantastic to use if you're ever trying to find a break in a cable. It will not only tell you there's a break, but it tell you how far down the cable the break happens to be. That can certainly help when you're trying to troubleshoot and becoming familiar with what these are. That is a time domain reflectometer, or a TDR. That is what we were looking for, because the TDR will certainly tell you what the overall length of that particular cable happens to be. 61% of you chose a TDR. That's exactly what we were looking for. We did have a tie for second place between tone generator and inductive probe. Those work together, obviously. If you want to find a cable that's in a very large bundle and you're just trying to locate where the other end of the cable happens to be, that's when you would use a tone generator and inductive probe. But neither of those will tell you what the total length of the cable happens to be. It just helps you find it. You might use your tone generator and probe to find the cable, then plug in your TDR to determine the length of the cable or certify the cable that's there. And lastly, a crimper is used to attach different connectors to the end of the cable. So that's not what we were looking for. And a punch-down tool allows you to connect a wire into a punch-down block. We looked earlier at that last question about punch-down blocks, and that is one that is very useful for connecting wires and connections, but it doesn't have anything to do with determining the total length of the cable. In this case, the only answer that would provide you with the total length is answer D, the time domain reflectometer, or TDR, and 61% of you got that one absolutely correct. Let's do another one. Next on our list is this question that asks, an administrator has defined a group of servers, networks, and applications using a text-based configuration file. Which of the following would best describe this file? Is it VM sprawl, infrastructure as code, SaaS, VPC gateway, or multi-tenancy? An administrator has defined a group of servers, networks, and applications using a text-based configuration file. Which of the following would best describe this file? Would it be VM sprawl, infrastructure as code, SaaS, VPC gateway, or multi-tenancy? If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one is. Lots of you are already getting your answers in quick. Then there was a little lull, and now it's picked up again. I always like to see the results as they're coming in to see how well or maybe how not well you happen to know an answer to a question. Sometimes what we think we know the answer to be may not be the one that we were really looking for as well. So make sure you're familiar with all of the answers and what they are referring to, because they might pop up not just in the questions I ask here, might pop up on your actual exam. That's why I always tell you, make sure you recognize those. And if you don't recognize one, go back to the exam objectives. It's going to help you quite a bit as you step through this. Let's see how you answered this one. The question again asks, an administrator has defined a group of servers, networks, and applications using a text-based configuration file. Which of the following would best describe this file? Is it VM sprawl, infrastructure as code, SaaS, a VPC gateway, or multi-tenancy? And how did you answer? We can see that 58% of you say that is infrastructure as code. 20% of you say multi-tenancy. And then we have single digits for the rest. 9% says SaaS, 6% for VPC gateway, and another 6% for VM sprawl. Well, in this case, we were defining pretty much the entire infrastructure in a configuration file. We refer to this method of definitions as infrastructure as code. Why would this be even useful, though? Why would you ever want to describe how a particular server is set up, what a particular server's IP address configuration is, what applications are on the server, what other servers we might need? Why would you go through this process? Well, when you're in the world of physical devices, you probably wouldn't do this. But when you're talking about a cloud-based infrastructure that you can literally create seemingly out of thin air, you need to somehow provide that cloud infrastructure with a description of what you'd like to build. And by creating one single file that has this entire configuration, you can simply define everything prior to needing it. And the instant you would like to build out all of these services, you simply provide that configuration file, the infrastructure as code, to your cloud-based system that will then interpret that infrastructure as code configuration file and start building out and installing all of these different servers and services that you've requested. This means that you can have exactly the same config every time. It's a very well-defined configuration, one you've tested, one you know works, and one you can easily deploy to any cloud-based data center wherever you might be in the world. So anytime you are trying to automate this. And that's, of course, one of the huge benefits of a cloud-based infrastructure is being able to create and tear down services anytime you would like. This is one of the mechanisms that allows us that level of flexibility. Infrastructure as code is the correct answer. And if you answered B, the 62% of you got this one absolutely correct. Now, 19% of you said multi-tenancy. And although multi-tenancy is something that's very common, especially in third-party data centers, that doesn't help you define servers, networks, or applications, and certainly doesn't define them in a text-based configuration file. So that's not one we would use for multi-tenancy. And then we had basically a three-way tie for third place. VM sprawl defines a VM infrastructure, virtual machine infrastructure, where maybe you've built out a bunch of services, but then you forgot to tear those services down later, and then you build out some others somewhere else, and then you build out others, and eventually you have all these VMs sitting around that you don't even know what they do, and you're not even sure if you can remove them at that point. That's one of the reasons we need to carefully document and have a very standard process for installing and bringing up these new services, as well as tearing them down when we're finished with them. And lastly, SaaS is software as a service. That describes an application that has been pre-built by a third party that you simply log in and use. You don't have to build the app. It's just there and available to you in the cloud. That has nothing to do with defining servers, networks, or applications. In fact, you often don't even know what servers, networks, or applications are even used by the software as a service that you are using. And then a VPC gateway, very commonly used in a cloud-based infrastructure, but it's not something that defines the servers, infrastructure, the systems that you happen to want to build or break down. So that is the infrastructure as code. If you answered B, you got that one absolutely right, and 62% of you were spot on with that particular question. Well done. Well, you can already tell there is a wide variety of topics on the Network Plus exam. If you were to look at my course, it is 93 videos of 14 hours of content. That's a lot of videos. That's a lot of content. And one of the things that I hope everybody is able to do is go through every single video and be able to watch every video and take notes on every video. But with so many videos, that's not always something that's practical for everybody. That's why I created a set of course notes. These course notes have all of the information that is in my videos collapsed into one single either PDF or a physical book. You can get both. And if you get the physical book, by the way, I give you the PDF for free. So all of the great information that's in my videos, all of the text, all of the graphics, all the important graphics anyway, all of the tables and information that I create just for these courses are in my course notes. Every video is in here. Every bit of text and information from every video is in here, certainly all the important ones. And you can find this all in my course notes. They're available on my website. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes. This is something that might help you in your studies. It certainly helps keep the site going. So I think it's a nice win-win for everybody. You can get a great set of high-quality notes that covers everything from the exam objectives, and you also help keep this crazy experiment going, whatever this happens to be. Those are my course notes, something you can find on my website at professormesser.com/NPCN. And you can, of course, get both the physical version and the digital version out on my website. Everything is there, and hopefully that can help you with your studies as well. Let's do more questions. I've got another one. Here we go. Next one on our list is this question right here. This question asks, which of the following should be used on a wireless network to prevent the transmission of a session key across the network? Would that be AES, Radius, SAE, TKIP, or HTTPS? Which of the following should be used on a wireless network to prevent the transmission of a session key across the network? Is it AES, Radius, SAE, TKIP, or HTTPS? If you think you know the answer, there they are right there. At professormesser.com/QA. That's where you can go to lock in your answer if you're watching this live. If you're watching this in the replay, then of course you can follow along with what we're doing, because that link will not be available on the replay. You have to be here live for that one. see what that works out as. So folks who are finally getting here, seeing rebuffering and loss on the stream. Well, you were in the very early part of this. So hopefully you've been here for a while now. You know, we kind of got past all of the issues we were seeing earlier with network issues. Hopefully that's behind us. We'll be able to see if we can keep that party going. I would like to make sure that we continue not having any type of packet loss, but that's old news at this point. We're way ahead of the schedule now. We're just moving forward to make this happen. So hopefully you're moving forward too, and hopefully you know the answer to this question. Getting into wireless network questions now. It's almost as much questions about wireless networks as there are wired networks, it seems, on some of these exams. So make sure you're familiar with both of those. I think both of those might help you a bit if you're ever working through them. Now, this is one, somebody asked about this earlier, is what if you didn't know this question? What if you think that this question was not something you were familiar with? Maybe you just didn't know what the answer to this is. You don't recognize these abbreviations. You don't know these acronyms. And so one of the things I tell folks is that just take a guess. If you leave a question blank, you get no points. And if you get it wrong, you get no points. So effectively, getting a question wrong is effectively the same thing as not answering it at all. That at least we do know from some of the things we've seen on the exam. So don't ever leave a question blank. At the very least, take a stab, because on a multiple choice-based question like this one, you have a 20% chance of getting it right. There's only 4 answers. You got a 25% chance of getting it right. So I highly recommend you always guess at what it might be. I think that's going to help you too if you ever get into the details of this. And for the questions like this, you can only select one answer on the actual exam if it's one that's only expecting a single answer there. So it's a radio button, as they say, instead of it being a checkbox. So you can only choose one. Make sure you choose good. Make sure you choose right. Make sure you choose the right answer when you're on these exams. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following should be used on a wireless network to prevent the transmission of a session key across the network? And let's see whether you chose AES, Radius, SAE, TKIP, or HTTPS. And you can see that we don't know. We're just not sure on this one. 39% of you, not a majority, but the plurality of you chose AES is what should be used to prevent the transmission of a session key across the network. 24% say TKIP, 16% say SAE, 13% say Radius, and lastly, 8% of you chose HTTPS. This is a bit of a problem with WPA2. There's a handshake process that occurs with WPA2 that is in the clear. Obviously, you can't encrypt information until you decide how you're encrypting information. So until the encryption part starts up, you have to transfer information across the network in the clear. So asking someone, what session key should we use? Let's use this one. Okay, we'll use that and get things started. That's something that a very crafty attacker can take advantage of. So in WPA3, we changed the authentication process for someone using a pre-shared key. And that authentication process has been changed to a process that we now call SAE. That's what we would use. So I think SAE allows us to create our shared session key, but we don't have to send that session key across the network. You might already think, this sounds really similar to Diffie-Hellman. And in fact, that's the idea. Is we sort of took the idea of a Diffie-Hellman, added to it to add some additional functionality, and we added that into our wireless network handshake for people that are on WPA3 and using a pre-shared key. So this is something called a simultaneous authentication of equals. That's what the SAE is really for. And this is one that can really help you. Not only does it have that ability to create a session key without sending a key across the network, which is just brilliant. That's exactly the way that you keep the key away from the attackers, is to never send it at all. And everybody gets a different session key, which means it makes it even harder for an attacker to gain access to all of the data that happens to be on a network. So this is You may see this referred to as a dragonfly handshake because that's sort of the term they use to define this particular type of connection. But it is a standard with the IEEE. It's built into WPA3. And if you're using a WPA3 network and using PSK, you're already using SAE. It's just built directly into it. So hopefully that's one that can help you as well. This is always a challenge if you get into these newer technologies, that something is new, something is different, something is enhanced, and that's certainly one that does that on your network. SAE is what we were looking for. The simultaneous authentication of equals is the right answer. And if you only 16% of us chose SAE, that gives you an idea of just how new it is and how it is something on the exam that you absolutely need to be familiar with. Now, 40% of you chose AES, and certainly AES is a very useful and important and popular encryption mechanism. It's an encryption protocol, but you can't encrypt, as I mentioned, it's a chicken and egg thing. We can use AES, but we need an encryption key. All right, where should we get this encryption key from? Well, let's exchange one. Wait, if I exchange one across the network, someone will see it. Well, let's exchange or create a way to create a session key without sending that across the network. So we can't use AES until we finally got the keys we need. We can't get the keys unless we protect it in some way. So AES would not be what we were looking for either. We also have answers that came through for TKIP. TKIP, another type primarily used in WPA type of network to be able to have our key exchange and encryption mechanisms. But again, we have this problem of the cart before the horse. We have to first come up with the encryption mechanisms before we can implement the encryption itself. So another good example of trying to make that work. And TKIP, probably don't have it on your network. You're probably not using WPA. You're probably at least using WPA2. And TKIP not used in WPA2 commonly. 13% of you said Radius. Radius is an authentication protocol not used to transmit session key information or not transmit session key information. So that's another example of where that would be. And lastly, we have HTTPS. HTTPS is another one that we have to think about. If we're ever in a scenario where we're encrypting website information, then HTTPS would make a lot of sense. But in this case, HTTPS is not going to help us on a wireless network prevent the transmission of a session key. We don't use HTTPS for that. We want to do something else to be able to make that happen. So hopefully, whenever you start getting into these, this becomes pretty important in understanding what the different options are. Only 17% of the folks answering chose SAE. So this is a good opportunity for all of us to learn something about transmitting information across the network, defining what a session key is used for, understanding how the session key is created, and how we no longer send it across the network on a WPA3 network. Another good example to upgrade to WPA3, if you have not upgraded yet, is being able to use this for SAE. Let's see if we can bounce back with a different question. Let's see how well you do with this one. This question asks, an employee has been fired for using their company laptop to run a personal business. Which of the following would define permitted activity with corporate devices? Would that be AUP, offboarding, DLP, password policy, or BYOD? An employee has been fired for using their company laptop to run a personal business. Which of the following would define permitted activity with corporate devices? Would it be AUP, offboarding, DLP, password policy, and BYOD? As always, please use the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll probably see if we can get through this one the same way we would if we were in the room taking the exam. Hopefully this is something that can help you be familiar with what these happen to be. These security questions you'll find on the A+, the Network Plus, Security Plus, and others. Security is everyone's responsibility, especially in IT. So hopefully this is one you're familiar with as well. I think if you're ever in a situation where you're going through the list of answers, again, make sure you're familiar with all of them, especially those that are abbreviations or acronyms. Sometimes knowing the acronym can help you. Other times knowing the acronym can't help you very much. So don't rely on a complete memorization of every possible acronym. It's much more useful for you to understand how the acronym and the technology behind the acronym is used on the network. That's probably a little more important than things that you are doing. So a number of you have already got your answers in on this one. So are we going to do better? I think we might do better on this one. When I see the numbers go up so quickly, I feel like maybe we know this one. Maybe we were able to lock this one in quickly. This question again asked, an employee has been fired for using their company laptop to run a personal business. Which of the following would define permitted activity with corporate devices? Would that be AUP, offboarding, DLP, password policy, or BYOD? And let's see how you answered. We have 64% of you that say it's AUP. And if that is the right answer, then that's a pretty large number to be able to have that one. 22%, another nice number, said BYOD would be what we would use. And then we have a two-way tie for third place. 6% apiece said offboarding. Another 6% said DLP. And then 0% said password policy. Sometimes I wish I had a separate screen up and I could kind of go over and say, and it was password policy, but no, it wasn't. 0% of you chose password policy. If we were trying to determine how people and what the appropriate use of these technologies are in the workplace, then we would need some type of policy around acceptable use. And that is the acceptable use policy, or AUP. Acceptable use policy is generally documented and available in an employee set of policies, a larger set of policies, usually the employee policy book. There may be rules of behavior. It may be called something else in your company, but it would probably cover how your phone should be used, how your laptop should be used, how your desktop computer should be used, and perhaps more importantly, the things that you probably shouldn't be using them for, which is probably one of many things. Like running your own business with company assets is probably something you shouldn't do. Now, I'm not sure why we have to write that one down, but legally, and that's one of the big reasons for creating an acceptable use policy, is that you now have told someone very specifically this is not allowed. And if you are dismissed from the company now has justification for making that personnel decision because you were using the assets in a way that you were specifically told and you agreed you would not use them that way. Acceptable use policy, an extremely important set of your overall policies. Make sure you are familiar with the acceptable use policies in your organization. There's probably things in there you've not even read it. You said, sure, I'll agree to that. You might want to go back and have a look at what's in the acceptable use policy. 65% of you chose AUP. That was answer A. Obviously, that was the one we were looking for. 22% of you said BYOD, bring your own device. Bring your own device is one where instead of carrying around two phones, you carry around a single phone that can be used both for personal use and for business use. But again, there is an acceptable use policy when you are sharing that device with business data. That's probably written up in your AUP as well. Simply bringing a device does not somehow define what type of activity is permitted and not permitted on the device that you are bringing. So even though you're bringing it, maybe you bought it, maybe it's yours, there's still an acceptable use policy if it's something that's being integrated into the company systems. So make sure you're familiar with those. Obviously, that's close. 22% of you chose BYOD, but that is not the answer we were looking for in this case. It would not define any permitted activity with corporate devices. 6% of you said offboarding. That is the process that occurs when somebody leaves the organization or moves to a different part of the organization. And a data loss prevention technology is one that commonly looks for certain types of sensitive data on the network and either informs or blocks that network from being able to go from one place to the other. DLPs prevent someone, for example, for sending a file with a bunch of credit card numbers across the network, but it would not define permitted activity with corporate devices. It might enforce that activity, but it does not give you a list of what's the definition of that activity happens to be. And then since 0% said password policy, it's almost not important that we cover it, but obviously having a password policy, passwords need to be a certain length, they need to have a certain set of criteria associated with them, maybe a certain number of characters, a certain type of character, a certain number of symbols. It might have a password policy that says the passwords have to be changed after a certain amount of time, or maybe the passwords themselves have to be enhanced with some type of multiple factors. That may be all calculated and documented and put into a password policy. In this case, the AUP, the acceptable use policy, is exactly what we were looking for. 65% of you got that one absolutely right. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you must have watched the first hour of this live stream. The way that you can earn that email is to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there for Contact Us. Make sure you use that link to submit your CEU. That continuing education unit doesn't work unless you use this particular format. Make sure you click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address. In the body of the message itself, put the super secret code word of the month on a line by itself. The super secret code word is password policy. Password policy at 0% is our super secret code word of the month. You can, of course, also put anything else you would like into that message. Just put password policy by itself on the first line. That helps me a lot find it quickly so that I can get that the process automated and send it off to my automation system, which then gets you an email. So that's why that's so important. So again, go to the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put something like the February 2023 Network Plus Study Group, something that I can recognize where this came from. And then the body of the message on the line by itself, put the words password policy. If you do that, it takes me about a week to turn these around, sometimes faster, sometimes a little bit slower. But I tend to get them back so that you're able to take that and use it towards a continuing education unit credit. So that covers this question about an AUP. We've got time for more questions, especially since we started late. So let's do that. Let's find some more questions that we can go through. This next on our list is a question that asks, all data to the corporate office uses a VPN tunnel, but all other traffic communicates normally. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is that load balancing, elasticity, dynamic routing, east-west, or split tunnel? All data to the corporate office uses a VPN tunnel, but all other traffic communicates normally. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is it load balancing, elasticity, dynamic routing, east-west, or split tunnel? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. There's your question, is figuring out the details of this. Isn't all traffic data? Well, I guess it could be, sure. Could be. Is all data traffic? No. We're now getting more philosophical, I think. Stick to the question. I think you'll be good. All data to the corporate office uses a VPN tunnel. All other traffic communicates normally. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? I think that's pretty straightforward. Being able to step through this. See if you know the answers. Lock in your answer, whether it's load balancing, elasticity, dynamic routing, east-west, or split tunnel. See what you happen to think this one is. This is a common configuration as well. So if you're planning to build out a VPN tunnel or have traffic to the corporate network, or really doing a lot of different things, there's a lot of different ways to implement this technology. Make sure you're familiar really with all of these, but obviously the one we're talking about in this case. We'll talk more about it in just a moment and be able to step through all of these. This is, a lot of you already locked in your answer, which makes me think maybe you knew what this one happened to be. Maybe you're already familiar with what this one is. So let's see if that's really the case. The question again asked, all data to the corporate office uses a VPN tunnel, but all other traffic communicates normally. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is it load balancing, elasticity, dynamic routing, east-west, or split tunnel? If we look at your answers, let's click show results, and we can see that 66% of you say that's a split tunnel. 24% of you, dynamic routing was the option. And then we go immediately down to single digits. 6% said load balancing, 3% said east-west, and 1% said elasticity. And if you've got some of the data going one place and some of the data going another, that is indeed split tunnel. And indeed, with ourselves, you can see that we're getting packet loss again on the YouTube. We gave it a shot, right? We'll see if it stays at 3% here for the moment. I saw it go to 4 and then back to 3. Let's try refreshing, but I'm not seeing the same type of thing from here. We're back on the primary server. Let's see how it works. That's a little bit nicer, isn't it? So we're back to 3%. You can kind of see the part that's having problems. This is when we went back to the primary side. Not sure what problems poor YouTube is having, but they are certainly having some problems today. Let's go back to the answer to that question, however, which is split tunnel. That's what we were looking for, was a split tunnel. That's where some of the information that you would send over the network goes through the VPN concentrator and into the corporate network. But you can configure a VPN. What if somebody wants to go to different websites? There's no reason to go all the way back to the corporate concentrator and then get retransmitted to a different website. So with a split tunnel, anything that's not going to corporate can instead effectively work normally, work the way it always has worked, back and forth to, for instance, ProfessorMesser.com. That's one of the great benefits of using a split tunnel, is having that capability. So I think as you're working through how you want to configure a VPN, someone might ask you, oh, well, should everything go through the concentrator, or do we want to have split tunnel? And you're going to need to know what that means and where we would use that. Split tunnel's a incredibly useful function. Just make sure you're familiar with it. In this case, that was the right answer. Those of you that answered E, split tunnel, that's exactly what we were looking for. Give you an idea of some of the different options for VPN. I think that might be useful. 25% of you said dynamic routing. Dynamic routing is when the routing tables inside of a device are updated automatically based on messages that come from, in most cases, other routers. Dynamic routing, very useful if things change on the network. All of the routers on the network can be updated with the new set of routes, especially if you lose a link and you need to work around that link. Dynamic routing does that automatically. If this was static routing, you would need to somehow type in a new route into your router manually. And sometimes that's something that's easily done, sometimes not easily done. So I think if dynamic routing can certainly help when you're trying to have a network automatically handle all of the routes without any type of user intervention or human intervention. Load balancing is great if you need to have redundancy of servers. For example, if you go to ProfessorMesser.com right now, there are multiple web servers on a load balancer. You might go to one or another physical server, depending on when you happen to hit the network and where you're coming from. Load balancing, very useful, but it doesn't determine whether traffic will be sent or not sent across a VPN. 3% of you said east-west, which is a way to describe traffic within the same data center. So traffic going from one server to another server within a data center and not leaving the data center, we often refer to as east-west traffic. And then lastly, elasticity. We mentioned earlier in the cloud-based infrastructure how you can click a button or have an automated process to build out more infrastructure. And then when the network gets slower again, you can take that application and get rid of those servers, tear those servers down again. That process of quickly creating and removing resources from the network is referred to as elasticity. Allows you to make the network much bigger and take it back down much smaller again, like a piece of elastic might be. In this case, being able to determine what traffic goes across the VPN tunnel and what traffic does not go across the VPN tunnel is aptly described by a split tunnel? Answer E, 66% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well, normally I'd stop right there, but with all these problems we've had today, I think we can do one more question. So let's get another one in here and being able to work through it. This next question on our list asks, a network administrator is configuring a firewall and needs to know the ports used by a specific application. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be iPerf, TFTP server, ping, nmap, or traceroute? A network administrator is configuring a firewall and needs to know the ports used by a specific application. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be, here we go, would it be iPerf, TFTP server, ping, nmap, or traceroute? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See what it happens to be. This was what we're looking for. All of these are things you need to know for the Network Plus exam. All you're expected to understand what these different tools, programs, utilities, or whatever it happens to be. A lot of different software utilities, because for networking, we use a lot of different pieces of software depending on what we're trying to do. This is a really good example of knowing what tools in your toolbox, whether they are software-based tools or not, what tools do we need to pull out and be able to use? So not only do we need to know which tool to use, we need to know how to use that tool, which is sometimes the difficult part of this. See if you know the answer. See if you can lock it in. Some of you are in the chat room are mentioning, oh, is this fuzzy? You may want to check your configuration for your YouTube. There's a cog wheel at the bottom of the video screen, and you can adjust what resolution you would like to use. That I'm sending out 1080p, so you should have a nice, crisp HD display. Probably got moved down a little bit when the problems with the network connection happened. So see if you can work through that. See if you can adjust it just a little bit. Maybe that will help you a bit as you go through it. Again, a lot of people locking in your answers on this one. It makes me think that maybe we know this one. Maybe we've used this one before. So see if you happen to know what this one is. So feel free to kind of break down what you think the answer is. Or maybe you may have even used some of these too. You may have been familiar already with some of these tools. The question is, does it do what we need it to do? And that's really the hard part of this, is that notice that the questions don't tend to ask you about, here's a thing, what does that thing do? Instead, they give it to you in a different way. They give you a scenario and say, you need to solve this problem. What do you use? And usually it's a couple of hops. It's a couple of connections to finally get you to what the right answer happens to be. I think this is one that's relatively straightforward, though. There's not really more than one. The one step that you would need to make. You should know this one. Really, you should know this one off the top of your head. Let's see if you do. The question again asked, a network administrator is configuring a firewall and needs to know the ports used by a specific application. Which of the following would provide this information? Is it iPerf, TFTP server, ping, nmap, or traceroute? And what did you choose? Let's see what you selected for your answer. 71% of you said you would use nmap for this. 12% said traceroute. 8% said iPerf. 4% said TFTP server. And 3% say ping. Notice none of the answers was you asked the application developers what port numbers they use. Don't even waste your time. Don't even bother with that. They probably have not documented that yet. Sometimes you will find that shiny nugget, that unicorn of an application developer or documentation that actually properly tells you what the port number is. That's usually not very common. You usually don't find that at all. Instead, you need to take this upon yourself to be able to scan that particular application server, and one of the best tools to determine what the port number is nmap. Nmap stands for Network Mapper, and I think most people consider nmap as being a tool to find open ports. That's certainly where it made its name. It has a ton of different options and configuration settings to be able to find those open ports. A lot of things you can do with it. But it does so much more than just open ports. It can tell you what the operating system is on that device, without logging into the device, just by sending very specific kinds of queries and examining the query that comes back. The response from Microsoft Windows will be slightly different than the response from Linux. And those responses are consistent in how they are different, which means you can look at a response and go, well, that's a Windows machine. Well, how'd you know that? Well, this bit here is flipped. That bit is not flipped in Linux. Sometimes it gets down to that level of detail. Not only can we tell the version of operating system running, we could tell the version of a service that might be running on a system. So if you know that it's a web server, but you don't know which web server, and you don't know which version of that web server, you can run a service scan on that device, and Nmap will tell you, oh, that's running Apache, and it's version 2.6, whatever it happens to be. There's so much more that Nmap can do. It's very extensible. It has a set of scripts that can run, and you can write your own scripts in a scripting language called Lua. Very common scripting language, but it's one that works perfectly for Nmap. Nmap refers to this as the Nmap scripting engine, or NSE, and there's a number of Lua scripts that are already included with it. Here's an example of running an Nmap scan. It tells you that this Nmap scan ran, the host is up. There were 91 ports that were closed. We're not even going to show those on the screen, but we found a number of ports that were wide open. So we have SSH and HTTP and RPC bind and NetBIOS session and HTTPS and Microsoft Directory Service and then AFP and then NFS and then UPnP. There's a lot of different services open on that device. This, by the way, as I look at the IP address, that is my NAS device, my Synology NAS. And so those are all of the ports that I've either opened or that were available already on the Synology NAS, and the port numbers associated with those, all from one single Nmap scan. That scan took about 90 seconds to run, very quick, to be able to find all of the different open ports on that device. That was a good example of exactly what our question was asking, which is, what ports are being used by a specific application? Nmap is the perfect solution for that. Powerful and informational, and something you probably even already have installed. 71% of you chose that. That is the right answer. There are other options here like traceroute, which is very good at telling you all of the different hops that are being used by a particular data flow, but it's not telling you what port numbers are being used by a specific application. So that's another good example of where you would run into these. 8% of you say iPerf. iPerf is a great performance testing tool. So if you wanted to see how well does a web server perform, how well is that file server performing, iPerf is a great tool to do that type of testing. But again, iPerf is not going to tell you what the ports that are open or being used by the application on that server. 4% of you say TFTP server, and that's certainly good for a trivial file transfer protocol. That's what that TFTP is. That's commonly used for transferring files very simply from one device to another. The T is trivial because it's sort of a pared down version of a file transfer utility. You don't have to log in. There's a number of protocols that are not available there. It's a very simple transfer, very commonly used for transferring configuration files between devices. They're very small. They're very quick. They don't need authentication. You just need to send those from one device to another. And lastly, a ping. Probably already familiar with ping because you want to see if a device is open or not, but it doesn't tell you anything about port numbers. Ping doesn't help you there. The only one of these options that does tell you about port numbers is the one that 71% of you chose. The answer is Nmap. That's what we were looking for. That is the right answer. If you answered D, Nmap, you got that question absolutely right. We've already seen that there are so many different questions and topics that we covered in the study group today. I do have a link to the CompTIA exam objectives on my site. Simply visit professormesser.com/objectives, and you'll get the full and complete list of everything you need to know to pass your Network Plus exam. This is a great checklist. This should be the first thing you read through before you start your studies. It should also be the last thing you use as a checklist before you book your exam, just to see if you really understand everything you need to know. So if you've gone through this list and you see, wait, here's something I didn't recognize, SAE, what is that? Then you know that you need to do a little bit more studying on that particular topic. So hopefully that can help you a bit for what you're working through. That is something you can also find yourself. Go to your favorite your favorite search engine and go to CompTIA exam objectives. It'll probably be the first one on the list. It's a great way to find the objectives. Make sure you download the latest version from the official website. Don't ever download a set of objectives from a direct link or from some other site. They're probably not up to date with the latest versions. We do one of these study groups every month. Next month, we have a Network Plus study group arranged for March the 14th. We also have A Plus study groups on the 7th and 8th of March. And on March 16th is a Security Plus study group. This month, as we are here in February, I have a Security Plus study group scheduled for later next week. So the same time next week. So Wednesday of next week at noon Eastern time. If you're ever wondering when the next event is going to be, you can always find it on the calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll see exactly when the next events are going to be. If you're in our Discord, there is an events channel in our Discord where I always keep those up to date as well. So you can't go wrong. You can find those in either place so you know exactly when the next live event is going to be. Well, we got through even with all the network issues and everything else, we got through all the questions for that first hour today, but there's more in our after show. Stick around. I'll take questions from the chat room. You can ask whatever questions you would like. I don't know that I would answer any questions that you would ask, but I'll try to answer the ones that you happen to put there. Don't forget about our Success Bundle, Network Plus Success Bundles at our website at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Our discounted vouchers are available for anybody in the U.S., Canada, and U.S. territories. You can find those at professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you liked this video, we would love it if you would give it a thumbs up. There's a little thumbs up right there on the video that's playing right now. And if this is something you liked, you might want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube. We would love it if you subscribed. Helps us quite a bit. You can also find a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question on our Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter, or if you like it with pretty pictures, our Instagram at professormesser.com/Instagram. Well, stick around for the after show. We got lots more Q&A coming up. Thank you for being here in this first hour. And we will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Okay, let me get a sip. Poor YouTube. They're having such challenges lately with their infrastructure. It would be great if those challenges occurred sometime other than noon on a Wednesday. That would be great. That would be fantastic if that was the case. I don't know that that's always going to work out that way, but that seems to be lately. They seem to be having quite a few challenges. There's always one thing or another, but that's sort of the nature of a live event and stepping through these. What I'd like to do now is answer questions from you. We've got all these people in the chat room. You've probably been going through your studies. If you have questions that hopefully I can cover, you can put them into the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, that's the YouTube chat that's right there on your screen. If you're on my website at professormesser.com/live, there's a chat that is embedded onto the page. It's the same chat. So we've got some options and being able to work through that. Hopefully that will get you the information that you were looking for. We've got some questions already coming in. So let's step through a number of these. Team Killer 21 says, do you cover Linux Plus? Linux Plus will be a fun one to do. I don't currently provide that as a course. I have a big list of what am I going to do next? And thankfully there's choices there. I can choose what I would like to do as the next thing. And I've got, 10 different courses there. And they're constantly being rearranged as to how I think they might fit. But something Linux related always seems to be somewhere near the top. That just isn't exactly perfect, a perfect way to go about doing this, but it's the way we do it now. We just are never sure exactly what we will do next. But right now, Linux Plus is not something that we currently support, unfortunately. The Wild Rooster asks, are you an affiliate of the Army Credentialing Assistant / Cool? I love all of the acronyms the Army and the Armed Forces uses. You thought Network Plus was bad. Try to negotiate the websites used by the federal government and then get even more precise, our armed forces. So first, thanks for even asking. I've tried to negotiate this maze a number of times. I do have a number of different credentials that we've created for the armed forces and other things in the U.S., but that particular Army credentialing assistant or COOL, not even heard of it. So no, but if you have information on it, you can always send it my way. I'll be glad to have a look and see what the different options are for doing that. Finally, a question that I can answer. How's the weather? How is the weather? What a good question. Let's bring up the weather, shall we? I've got, if I pull this up here, let's have a look at the nightstand. Right now, 74 degrees. 74 degrees. Clear skies, partly cloudy. Looks like partly cloudy, 74 degrees here. High today, 74, low 71. And now, some Lionel Richie. The 74 degrees is probably the high today. That's pretty good. It's pretty nice out. Not wearing shorts yet, but we're getting there. It feels like we're getting out of the winter part and we're getting more into the spring part already. So that's always good. Other questions in the chat room. Let's clear that one out. There he goes. Other questions. Other things we have. I think another one, this is the one I was trying to click on right here. What are the best positions to apply for with a Network Plus certificate? That's really up to the employer. And in fact, that's sort of why I mentioned, I have a video, it's in the YouTube video description of this video, of how to get a job in IT with no experience. And one of the things I mention is that you need to have a strategy. So you're probably looking at Network Plus because there are certain advantages to earning that certification. But what are the advantages? So I highly recommend you look to see what jobs in your area are looking for this particular certification. That might help you determine which one you should get first. I kind of, I'll sort of bookend this question with one that came in right behind it that asked, is it a good idea to take Security Plus before Network Plus? Or should you take Network Plus before Security Plus? And again, it depends on what the employers are looking for. Let me give you a scenario. Let's say that you're working in LA and you're looking at different jobs there. There's a network operations center that is looking for professionals for entry-level positions. And they say to work here, it would be great if you had a Network Plus, because a lot of the things we deal with in a NOC, a network operations center, focus around networking technology. So it would be good if you had a networking technology certification. Let's look at another position that's in the DC area, Washington, DC. And what you'll find in DC is that there tends to be more of an emphasis on Security Plus. So you may find the jobs there talk a lot more about needing Security Plus rather than Network Plus. So I guess the answer to this question is it really does depend on where you live and what employers are looking for. And it also depends on your specific, your specific goals and objectives. So you may want a job in a NOC. Maybe you want to work for the federal government. Maybe you want a job doing something else. Your certifications should have some representation there. So if you want to get into Linux, maybe you look at a Linux certification. You want more networking, you do Network Plus, you do CCNA, you do some of the others. You want to do security, do a Security Plus, get a Palo Alto Network certification, get a CISSP. There's other certifications on that side. It should always have some type of relationship back to what you want to do and what jobs are available to you given those particular set of criteria. So that's a great place to go, by the way. If you're trying to figure out, just go look at what jobs are out there and what people are looking for. That should help you have at least some context. It's some direction on what you might want to do next. And indeed, that might determine what that's really where things. I mentioned this in asks, what's the difference? I guess the idea and on the air. We'll see if we can at least hang out at that 3% number and see if it gets a little bit better. This may be one where we just cut it close up itself and shows me a 3, 4. Nope, we're going back down again. No, that might provide at least something that we can work through. This. So we'll keep waiting. No talking to the YouTube servers. Not having much success. talking to those. So we'll see where this goes. It may be that in the air, still trying different things. And I can see the cash is at 3%. So we'll just have to wait and see. We'll just have to see if it figures it out, if it comes back and makes those things happen. You know, when this happened a couple of weeks ago, it came back, but by the time it came back, we had no time left in what we were doing. This may be the same situation we run into. It just sort of eats into the time frame, and we're not able to make that happen. So those things happen. We'll figure it out and see what's here. In the meantime, I am going to go to this because maybe I would like to quickly see what's going on packet-wise, at least on my local network. Make sure that nothing is too awry. I don't think that it is, but it's always good to have a look. So we're going to do that. We're going to go to this piece and capture. This looks good. Perform a capture. Let's do it and see what we got here. So really, we got normal traffic on my network. Nothing too unusual. A lot of the pings, though, yeah, I'm getting requests and responses. That's my MTR that's going out. So that part's good. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see. It looks like it's back to 3%. So are we through it? I think we are. I think it finally figured out where the problems were and got them resolved. So at least we got that going. The question is, are we good? Yeah, I think we are. We're back. You can't see it on your side. Here we go. So see the dip is where we were, and then it popped back to 3%. So that's when the Google services, the YouTube services finally came back. So we got a little time left, so I'll be glad to take questions from the chat room. We can go through all of those. Be good if I had screen to go to. There it is. Okay, so let's see if we can get a few more questions in. I think I would like to do that. I'm going to scroll back up before we had the problem, and we'll have a look at some of the questions that came through. I don't think anybody got the answer to the question I asked earlier, which was you've got radius, TACAS, and LDAP. You tend to use whichever one you happen to have. So if you are a location that already has radius, you're using a radius server. If you have a lot of Cisco equipment, you're probably using TACAS. If you have Microsoft Active Directory or standalone LDAP server, you're probably using LDAP. We mentioned this in the video, so I really recommend you go back to the video on authentication protocols because I talk a little bit about which one of these do we use and how do we use them. So absolutely have a look at that. That might help with some of the context and allow you at least the idea of where do we break down what we want to do with these. Other questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat room. We got more coming in. A number of you have probably had it. I'm watching the viewer activity, and it's pretty much what you would expect. Once we got down to the network problems, a lot of you decided, you know, we're not going to stick around for something that's not working. Can't really blame you though. Just sort of the way it happens. But I am still here. Let's take some more questions from the chat room. You're able to put those in. If you're on the YouTube side, it's the YouTube chat. If you're on ProfessorMesser.com/live, it's the embedded chat that is on that page. And I'm more than happy to answer that as well. There's quite a bit on the Network Plus exam. And I think a lot of people don't realize. I always tell people over and over, do you have the objectives? Have you looked through the objectives? They're going to tell you everything you need to know about this exam. So I highly recommend you do that. It is a very useful tool, not only to determine where you should start your studies, but before you book your exam, use it as a checklist. Use it as a way to tell, am I really ready to take this exam? It's probably one of the most common questions we get is, how do I know if I'm ready to take the exam? And the exam objectives is the definitive way. That's always my answer. Have you gone through the objectives? If you can go through each bullet of the objectives and explain that bullet to a third party, then you're ready to go. Here are, let's bring up the objectives. I've got them right here. So here's the objectives. So I'm going to flip through the first couple pages, but you could see And for example, section 1.1, compare and contrast the open systems interconnection, OSI model layers, and encapsulation concepts. So you need to know the OSI model. You need to understand what an Ethernet header is, what Internet Protocol header is, what a TCP and UDP header is, what TCP flags are, what the payload is, and what an MTU is. So if you can explain those concepts to someone else or to yourself in a mirror, then you can now go to the next section where you go through all of those bullets, and then go to the next section and go through all of those bullets. So you're just going to keep going over and over and over again through all of the bullets until you get through, this is page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 pages of those bullets. And then there are acronyms at the end of the exam objectives, but not as important as knowing what's in the objectives themselves. You'll find that going through the objectives effectively brings in the acronyms that are important to know for the exam. So that's what I would recommend to you as well. Wow, got me on the screen way too many times. Let's see if we can fix that out a little bit. One is enough. Two is too many, as they say. Question about security, which is it necessary to do A+ before Network Plus and Security Plus if you're interested in security? And again, it depends on what employers would like to see, but it is not necessary to go through A+ or Network Plus if you would like to take Security Plus. If you want to start with Security Plus, there are many people that do that, especially if you now work in an area where people would like you to have Security Plus. A number of people start with that certification because of that reason. So there are no prerequisites. There's no requirements that you take A+ or Network Plus before taking Security Plus. You can jump right in. And in fact, between A+ and Security Plus, there's not a lot of overlap there. So you could take the A+, but when you start Security Plus, you'll find that doesn't help me very much to have my A+, because so little of the A+ concepts are included in the Security Plus certification. So that's why I tell people, make sure that you are familiar with the objectives. Make sure you're familiar with what's in that list. As long as you know the objectives, you'll do fine regardless of what version or which specific exam you're interested in taking. So start with Security Plus if that's something that can help you. But it really is important that you know what employers would like. So it's not up to what I think, or really even what you think. If you live in the DC area and you're looking at jobs, and 9 out of every 10 jobs is going to ask you for Security Plus, you probably should get Security Plus first. Now, there are folks in the chat room that say, wait, the A+ has great information in it. Yes, it does. But if an employer is looking for Security Plus, as great as the information of A+ is, that doesn't help you very much. The employer wants you to have Security Plus. That's why I tell you it's not about what you specifically would like or even what I would like. It's really about what you're trying to do, what's your strategy, and what do employers want you to have. So that's important too. Other questions. We talked a little bit in the pre-show about this one, but we'll sort of attack this one again because this one comes up from time to time. Should I be more concerned in getting into CCNA, that's the Cisco Certified Network Administrator, or Network Plus first? Employer just wants me to have one of them. Well, if you're just trying to find one that the employer says, we want you to get one of these, pick one and go get it. Well, the Network Plus is certainly much easier. Network Plus is an entry-level certification. CCNA is an intermediate-level certification. And I would argue CCNA significantly more complex than Network Plus is. So if you're just trying to get one of these for your job and they said, we'll take either one, go get Network Plus. You will save time. You will save effort. You will save your sanity. Network Plus is the choice there. If either one of them is compatible, the employer says, I don't care which one, go get Network Plus. Now, in the future, if you're thinking, I'd love to be a network administrator, I'd love to manage switches, I'd love to configure routers, I'd love to design network infrastructures, you will probably eventually need to get your CCNA. And having the Network Plus already as a foundation is going to make that process even easier. Now, could you simply start your CCNA? Yes, it's harder. Yes, it's going to be more time. Yes, it's going to be a lot more that you'll have to learn. And in my opinion, a much more difficult exam itself. You can still do that. You could still start with your CCNA, but you're effectively going to have to learn a huge chunk of what you would have already learned on the Network Plus anyway. And then on top of that, you'll need to learn all the Cisco stuff. So that's why I tell people you need to be sure what you want to do, because the CCNA is a significant investment in time. It's a significant and more complex certification to get. But if your direction is moving towards one in network management, network security, or ultimately security and IT in general, CCNA is a good one to have in your pocket. Having a strong knowledge, a strong foundation in networking is going to help you immensely when you work in IT security. So that's why I recommend that. So that's important. This is sort of self-explanatory. This has a little bit more in it in the original question, which is I've been on the service desk. I like the job. I've taken time off to raise my child. Now I want to get back into the work field. I like Security Plus. There are jobs here for Security Plus. Should I go that way? Yes, that's it. There's your love connection. There's the match you were looking for. The jobs will like you to have Security Plus. It's a great first certification for Security Plus. Now you can walk in the door with that certification. Absolutely, you should go that way. Why would you take some other certification if they already told you they want you to have Security Plus? It seems rather straightforward. Should eventually you work back towards Network Plus or A Plus? Perhaps. If your job certainly is one that leads you to need that knowledge or have an understanding of that foundational knowledge, you can always do that next. I personally started with Security Plus. Between all three of those, Security Plus was the first one I took. Then I took Network Plus. Then I took A Plus. I did them exactly backwards. But that's because at the current time, I was working in a job where I was a systems engineer working with security technologies. And the employer said, we'd like you to have some certification associated with these security technologies. We have some certifications we offer. We'd like you to get a third-party security certification. So I went and got Security Plus. Another good example where the employer asked me to go get a third-party security certification. Security Plus made perfect sense. And once I got that, I realized, let's go do Network Plus, because why not? I had a strong foundation in networking. It seems like something I could walk in the door and take, but it turns out a lot of things I still needed to study. So it took a few weeks, studied Network Plus, took that one. Then I thought, well, I've been working with computers forever. Let's jump into A Plus, and then really got turned around because there was a lot more in the A Plus certification that I even realized. Like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's the way that works. Oh, I wondered what that thing on the motherboard was. Because when you're just trying to put systems together and get them out the door, you don't necessarily spend the time to understand every single component that happens to be in that device. So that's a really good example of doing these. And that's why Security Plus as a first certification is just fine. Another question. So I shouldn't do Network Plus if I'm doing CCNA? Not necessarily. You may find it easier to do CCNA if you already have Network Plus in your pocket. So that's up to you. If you skip the Network Plus and go straight to CCNA, it's going to take you longer because now you would effectively have to learn all the Network Plus content, or a good chunk of it, and then add on the Cisco content. So I don't think, I think your the path of least resistance is to start with the Network Plus it gives you a certification to put in your pocket, then move to CCNA. And you'll find that a lot of the things you have to worry about in CCNA, now you don't have to worry about them because you already covered that in Network Plus. What about rollover cables? What about patch cables? What about understanding what a router does, what a switch does, what a load balancer does? All these fundamental questions you already know. So you don't have to go through that part. If anything, having your Network Plus makes the Cisco part go so much faster because you don't have to get bogged down in the fundamentals. You already know the fundamentals. You can simply jump straight ahead and jump into the CCNA and you're good to go. So that's what I would focus on. So this is a pretty good question. I think this is one where we need to also kind of think about what we want to be able to do. I'm interested in programming and networking. I don't have experience. What can I do to break through in this career? Well, that's two very different things. Programming and networking. That's like two completely different jobs. The first thing I'd recommend is to see what employers in your particular area would like you to have. And what you tend to find, this is not always the case, but it is certainly the vast majority of cases, folks that are doing programming, or what I like to call application development. You're building mobile apps, you're building apps in a browser, you're building applications for Windows or for other operating systems. Those applications involve and require application development. They require programming. And programming is an incredibly complex set of skills. It takes an entire career to become proficient at programming. That's why when you look on the IT side, you'll notice we don't do programming. We don't create applications. We don't modify and update mobile-based apps or web-based apps. We just don't do that. We don't have time for that. We're too busy configuring servers, maintaining the operating systems, securing the networks, making sure connectivity is good, doing all the things that you need to do to keep the data safe and available. We don't have time to program. And that's why you tend to see in most environments, here are the programmers doing the programming thing. Here's the IT staff doing the IT thing. And those two don't connect with each other. They have nothing to do with each other. And so I really tell people, if you're planning to get into programming, go jump into the programming side and go for it. If you're getting into IT, there's no reason to learn anything about programming. You're not going to do any. You'll do a lot of scripting. You'll need to know PowerShell. You'll need to know Python. You'll need to understand batch files and shell scripts. But that is not the same thing as programming. That's not even close, quite honestly. Programming is a completely different set of skills that's going to take you a lifetime to master. So programming is not something we commonly do in IT. We're too busy just keeping up with Microsoft updates, Linux updates, connectivity over the network, designing and building out the next network infrastructure, making sure the security systems are in place, upgrading the firewalls, making sure the IPS is working, making sure the VPN is operating as expected, implementing multi-factor authentication into all of those, maybe a proximity monitor, maybe you can sort of see why we don't have time to do programming. So that's what I would also recommend to you, is don't worry so much about the programming side of things, or don't worry so much about the networking side. Pick one or the other and go with that. Now, if you happen to find one of these remarkably rare and unusual environments where they want you to do both, then what you may want to focus on is a very simplified version of programming, probably not C++. Probably want to do something that's a little bit easier, or maybe find out more details. What do you mean by programming? Sometimes people say programming, they really mean creating PowerShell scripts. They really mean creating scripts in Python. So it's good to do a little bit of clarification if you ever go into that. That might help as well. That's my recommendation. Here's a common problem, Brooks, who says, I passed the A+ 1001 in October, but the 1002 expired, really was retired, before I could take it. And in fact, it retired in October. Would you recommend taking the 1101 and then the 1102, or move into Network Plus? Same scenario here is that I don't know what your objectives are. I don't know what employers are asking for, and I don't know which one of these interests you more. And really, that's what it comes down to. It's sort of a combination of all of those things put together. Are employers in your area asking for Network Plus? How many of them? For what positions? Are any employers looking for the A+? How many employers are looking for A+, and in what positions? You know, those are the things that the practical side of certification is, what do you do with it once you have it? And that's an answer to a question that you should have asked before you started studying. There should be a means to the end. The means is that certification, but what's the end? What are you trying to get to? The certification is just the stepping stone to get you to whatever that end happens to be. And maybe you think, I'd love to go work in a network operations center. I'd love to manage switches and routers and design networks. Okay, maybe Network Plus makes more sense. Or maybe you think, I just need an entry-level position. I don't care what it is. I can be in a help desk. I could do service calls. I'll do whatever they want. Well, then maybe A+ makes more sense. But you should really check the job postings in your area, see what employers are asking for. It becomes so much more important if you're doing that. So make sure you're familiar with it. and what employers in your area are looking for. And the more in touch you are with your local employment situation, the better decisions you'll be able to make about what your next steps with certifications happen to be. Sometimes that's really what leads us down the road. You need to create a strategy before you even start studying. Why am I studying for this certification? Where am I trying to get to? And ultimately, that's what you want to do, is to be able to figure that piece out. Then when you start your studies, you know why you're creating the cert. You know why you're going through this process. You know what you're going to do with this certification once you earn it, which is to put it on your resume, send it into that company, and see if you can get that job you're trying to get. I think that's the important part. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of a tumultuous up and down study group. So hopefully that's given you some insight into some of the questions and answers that others have had. But this isn't over with the Q&A. We got always somebody hanging out in the Discord, it seems. I'm in there. We welcome you to join us on the Discord side. If you're trying to get in a study group, if you're trying to find other people studying for the same certification you are, and you'd like to bounce questions off of other people, it's a great community that we have over on the Professor Messer Discord. If you'd like to join us, you can always find it at professormesser.com/Discord to be able to join us. It's something that's kind of fun. And there's always somebody in there willing to answer questions. It is really a remarkable group of people there. We'd love to have you join us over there too. Come on back next week on Wednesday of next week, exactly 1 week from today. We've got our Security Plus study group. We'd love for you to join us there as well. Simply go to professormesser.com/live a week from now. You can also find our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar, or if you are in our Discord, there is an events channel which shows you in your local time when our next live event is going to be. If you love this video, we'd love it for you to give a thumbs up. It really does help us quite a bit. It costs nothing, but it really does help us when we're talking with our friends at YouTube. And we'd love for you to come back for our study group next month. Be sure to check the calendar for more. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.